Long ago, in Tibet, in a land called the Land of Snows, there was built a monastery, Tashi Lhumpo. And Tashi Lhumpo was the home of the first Dalai Lama. And it continued on, and continued on, and continued on, preserving high in the Tibetan plateau the teachings of an Indian mystic. The Dalai Lamas grew one generation after the next, one incarnation after the next, and they began to develop, along with the other high lamas in the region, a way of preserving the core teachings of compassion, core teachings of peace, nonviolence, respect. And as they grew and as the culture deepened, they had a particular way of transferring the teachings. The Dalai Lama would be trained by his primary teacher, who would recognize him as a young child and be really under his tutelage. And then the Dalai Lama would grow to be middle-aged, and his mentor would grow old and die. And he would be invested with the core teaching of peace, compassion, nonviolence, and the capacity to recognize the young Panchen Lama, to then become the teacher to that Lama. So for hundreds of years, this began a system of preserving the tradition. And the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama became known as the sun and moon of Tibet. So sun and moon in the land of snows, preserving a culture based in teachings of compassion. Then the Chinese invaded. After being an independent region for all of their known lives, and lives before, and their grandparents' lives, and their grandparents' grandparents' lives, they became subject to something that our own native community became subject to in this country: westward expansion. And with a story that denied their culture a justification for essentially the beginnings in the 1950s of what has become a cultural genocide. So this culture that wasn't armed and didn't really, was 50% monastic, with a vow against killing, could really do nothing much other than pray, be kind, and hope for harmony. Not being a country that sat on a large oil reserve, there wasn't really a strong pull to protect this country and this culture. And so there began the Tibetan diaspora. The Tibetan diaspora was probably, you can see it most in the story of the Panchen Lama. As the Panchen Lama, the second to the last one, tried with harmonious means to navigate after the Chinese invaded in 1950, and then after 1959, when there was a Tibetan uprising and it was clear that the Dalai Lama had to flee, the Panchen Lama still tried to preserve peace for his people, for his monastery, for his monks and nuns. And it wasn't really until the late 70s when he began to protest. And upon protesting, he met with death. Not long after that, the next Panchen Lama was discovered, enthroned. A little boy, 6 years old. And in 1995, this little 6-year-old boy was kidnapped by the Chinese and his whole family, leaving the Tashi Lhumpo Monastery. Well, the Tashi Lhumpo Monastery had earlier, before this, after 1959, really had to be in 1972, moved to India. But it was moved to India without the leadership of its High Lama. Then, in 1994, the young boy that would have been trained by the Dalai Lama in the tradition that had been historic to the region since 1447 and to the lineage since 1447, disappeared. In 1995, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in the response to the lack of leadership for now caring for the monks and nuns and preserving the teachings of the lineage, asked Ken Rinpoche if he would be the abbot of the Panchen Lama's monastery. And Ken Rinpoche at that time had just started a kids' school in Ladakh, his home region. He had actually been educated at Tashi Lhumpo in Tibet. And he had a real devotion, has a real devotion to children, and really didn't want to leave the kids. So you can imagine the strength of courage, or the strength of compassion, or the strength of determination to really be in a role of giving to children. If the Dalai Lama asks you to have this big high-powered job and you say, no, I want to stay with the kids, it's a very powerful decision to make, and those kids are very lucky. So after many years, 1995, and basically 5 years later, His Holiness asked again, and Rinpoche said again, no, I really want to stay with the kids until I have a full graduating class. And so a few years ago, his first graduating class, 10th grade, came about. His Holiness appeared and came and gave blessing to the children. And at that time, appointed Ken Rinpoche as the abbot of the Panchen Lama's monastery, Tashi Lhumpo, in exile. So we have this profound story, this profound historical narrative about a culture, the preservation of a culture, the mechanism for the preservation of that culture, a culture based in compassion, love, tolerance, and the interruption of that culture, the traumatic interruption of that culture. So we're gathering here tonight really with the heart of really responding to Ken Rinpoche's heart, that he's here in this profound role at this time in history, and really serving his people, serving the continuation of the Tashi Lhumpo in exile monastery, and trying to raise funds for the rebuilding of that monastery as expressed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And also trying to raise money for this beautiful school in the Himalayas for Tibetan children, another way to preserve his culture and to provide teaching and support and love and nurturance. This year, his graduating, one of the little girls in his graduating 10th grade was had the most distinguished honors in the whole region. And none of the kids in his school drop out of school or fail. And I was talking to him about it, and he said, it's because we bring a lot of love into the community. It's because the teachers teach with love. It's because the foundation of the school is based on love. So this preservation of culture, this preservation of compassion, of education, of the maintenance of a lineage based in love is really kind of the living action of what Ken Rinpoche's life has been dedicated to. And we're very honored to have him here tonight.